Hello, buenas tardes, buenos días, buenas noches, wherever you are and however you are seeing this. Welcome to the first ever Latinx Kidlit Book Festival. This is Frontera Lands, Immigrant Stories from the U.S.-Mexico border. Yo soy Aida Salazar. I'm an arts activist. I'm an author of the verse novels The Moon Within and Land of the Cranes. And I'm also a proud founding member of Las Musas, which is an unprecedented Latinx debut group in Kidlit. And I'm going to be moderating today's discussion. But before we begin, I'd like for us to acknowledge the moment that we are in this world, the suffering that so many are experiencing because of this pandemic and on so many levels. And I want to ground us in gratitude and reverence, but also in hope and in wishes for wellness and safety and for joy for all the sentient beings in Mother Earth. And in the wish that our work as storytellers will continue to be a contribution to the healing. And I'd also like to acknowledge that I am on Ohlone land here in Oakland, California. And if you know the original inhabitants of where you are, please take a moment to acknowledge them as the first peoples and caretakers of where you now call home. Thank you. I'd also like to point you to our chat box. Please take a moment to see and read our anti-harassment policy. So we have a star-studded panel of authors today, and I want to start by introducing them, and then we'll launch into some questions about today's topic. So we'll begin with Alexandra Diaz, is the Pura del Pre Honor and America's Award-winning author of The Only Road. Her other books include The Crossroads and Santiago's Road Home. She is the daughter of Cuban refugees and has translated the above books into Spanish along with her mother. So welcome, Alexandra. Francisco X. Dork immigrated from Mexico at the age of 9 with his mother and his adopted father. He is the author of 8 novels, including Marcelo in the Real World, recipient of the Schneider Family Book Award, The Last Summer of the Death Warriors, which received the Elizabeth Walden Award, The Memory of Light, recipient of the Tomas Rivera Award, and Disappeared, which received the Young Adult Award from the Texas Institute of Letters and was a Walter Dean Myers Award honor book. Illegal, the sequel to Disappeared, was published in August of 2020. Welcome, Francisco.
Thank you.
And next we have Reina Grande. Reina is the author of the memoirs The Distance Between Us and A Dream Called Home, and the novels Across 100 Mountains and Dancing with Butterflies. Her books have been adopted as the common read selection by schools, colleges, and cities across the country. Reina has received an American Book Award and the El Premio Aslan Literary Award and a Luis Leal Award for distinction in Chicano Latino literature, among others. Bienvenida, Reina.
Gracias.
And finally, we have Yuyi Morales, who was born in Jalapa, Mexico, where she currently resides. New York Times bestselling author and illustrator, Yuyi Morales lived for many years in the San Francisco Bay Area, where she still maintains close relationships with booksellers and librarians. Professional storyteller, dancer, choreographer, puppeteer, and artist. She has won the prestigious Pura del Pre Award for illustration 6 times. For Dreamers, Just a Minute, A Trickster Tale and Counting Book, Los Gatos Black on Halloween, Just in Case, A Trickster Tale and Spanish Alphabet Book, Niño Wrestles the World, and Viva Frida, also a Caldecott honor book. Wow, muy bienvenida.
Gracias.
It's such a pleasure to be here with all of you to discuss such an important topic. Over the course of history, the US-Mexico border, or the Frontera land, is a region that represents many realities and is home to multiple and often warring communities. It's a region filled with hope and dread, incarceration and freedom, love and loss. It's a spectrum of dynamics, which many Latinx writers, including you here on this panel, have long articulated through a beautiful literary legacy. Newer efforts like that of Dignidad Literaria and the Our Voices Are Protest video made by Las Musas and the Latinx Kidlit community are reminders that what happens in the US-Mexico border are very much at the center of the consciousness of Latinx writers. We are affected because our communities are affected. But there is no one singular story. So today's panel, we're going to delve into what it means to migrate, to cross borders, whether they be physical, linguistic, or imaginary, and what that says about immigrant survival, resilience, and resistance, and also about the role of Latinx books and how they take in shaping the narrative of this experience. So without further ado, I'd like for all of you to please tell us a little bit about your book and your connection, your personal connection to your story. And we're going to just do this popcorn style, so whoever would like to answer first, please go ahead.
Well, I'll go first since I'm the oldest in the group. So my book Illegal is a sequel to a book that I wrote a couple of years ago named Disappeared. And Disappeared is the story of a young woman and her brother, Sara and Emiliano, who live in Juarez, Mexico. And Sara is investigating the disappearance of so many women in that city. And the more she investigates, the more her life becomes in danger, until she and her brother have to flee into the United States. And Illegal, I didn't intend to write a sequel to Disappeared, but a few months after I finished Disappeared, I thought that the story wasn't complete. So I wrote the story of Illegal that follows the brother and the sister into the United States. Sarah pleads for asylum, and of course, at that time, she is immediately put in the detention center. And Emiliano tries to complete the investigations that Sarah had into the disappearance of the women. Only he's now investigating the ties of that evil in the United States. So the two books kind of form like a mirror of each other, where the evil in Mexico is really connected to the evil in the United States. And I thought it was important to create two books to kind of get at the complete picture. Thank you.
I'll go next since I'm the following oldest after Francisco. So my book, my latest book is Dreamers and Soñadores en Español. And this is a story that I wrote inspired in my own immigration story. But more than trying to tell what happened and any events that might have happened when I came to the United States, because I never had a story that was filled with car chases or I didn't put my life in danger when crossing the border, unlike a lot of other people. What I was trying to do with this story was more to tell about the things that I have learned through the process of becoming an immigrant. And I did it in a picture book. So this is a book for very young children, but in which I reflected more about how important it is for every one of us to recognize the value of our own stories. When I was asked to write about my immigration story, I was thinking, like, what am I going to tell children? I came as an adult, and like I said, there aren't any events that will make a Hollywood movie out of it, right? But then, in the same way that I was doubting that my story had enough hump or something to be part of a published book, I realized that I was telling that to everybody else who has a story that is not filled with spectacularity. And that I was telling children that maybe their story wasn't valid because it didn't have anything that I could awe about. The truth is that all of our stories are filled with so much courage and learning and transformation that they are very valuable and they are very worth being put in a book and being told to other people. So Dreamers, more than anything else for me, is an invitation to every child to let us know about their story and rejoice and celebrate it.
All right. Well, next, because I think I'm older than Alexandra. So Aida, I know you brought up, the idea of the border, and for me, the border entered my life when I was 2 years old, and that was when my father left me and my siblings behind in Mexico to cross the border and come to the United States to look for work. So in The Distance Between Us is a memoir, and I write about that experience of being left behind. And then, of course, 2 years after my father crossed the border, my mother also left us and came to the United States. So now I had two parents on the other side of the border, and my siblings and I were still in Mexico. So for a long time, I definitely resented that border that had come between me and my parents, and that kept us apart. And then when I was 9, my father came back to Mexico and brought me across the border. And I thought, now that we're all on the same side, we can finally be a family again. But, that separation had taken a toll on the family, and we were never the same after that separation. So that's something that I still struggle with even to this day as an adult. I'm still struggling with that trauma of being separated from my parents and the distance that was created because of that separation. And in the second part of the book, I write a lot about my immigrant experience coming here to the US, because I thought once I ran across the border and I managed to get across and to finally start a new life in the United States, I thought I was done with borders. And then I quickly realized that the geographical border was just one of the many borders I was going to have to overcome. And of course, as soon as I arrived, I discovered there was a language border, there was the cultural border, and then, of course, because we were undocumented, there was the legal border that I had to get across. So it was like border upon border that I kept coming upon. But, one thing I learned as a child when I ran across the border at 9 years old was that if I could cross the US border at 9, I could cross any border. And that has really given me a lot of strength as a person. It has helped me to overcome my fears whenever I encounter an obstacle. And I tell myself that I can do it, that I know how to cross borders. And that is the way I have tackled every single obstacle that has come my way since.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alexandra Diaz. I am the daughter of Cuban refugees, and I grew up hearing stories on what it was like for my parents to leave their country, their family, their home, and not know if they were ever going to see that again, see them again, see their country again. So this was something that has been very much a part of my upbringing. I am a native Spanish speaker, and I didn't learn English until I started school. So as a writer, I had opportunity to write The Only Road, which has done very well, and it is a book about two children who have to leave their family, their home in Guatemala, and make the journey through Mexico. So I was very much in that world of my characters, because even though it wasn't something I had physically experienced, I could bring the emotions and the sentiments that I had grown up with hearing from my parents into my books. One of the big things that was important, well, not important, but very prominent in the news was the fact that children were being separated from their families, and they were detained in immigration detention centers. And like Reina, I mean, the traumatic effect of being separated from your parents, from your family, from your loved ones is something that will stay with children for the rest of their lives. I mean, it's even if they say, oh, it was only 24 hours, but 24 hours of being separated from the people, forcefully separated from the people that you love, is extremely traumatic. So that is something that I have here in Santiago's Road Home, is show readers what is happening in the world today, and could very well be something that has happened to their friends, to themselves, to their families. It's not something that happened a long time ago. It is prominent in today's world, and it's prominent very much in the US and in the world where we live in. I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, is Tewa land, and definitely, heavily influenced by people who have these stories, and a community that has experienced a lot of the things that my books relate to. So hopefully my books can offer both a window and a mirror to the issues that are going on in today's world.
Thank you. All right, so Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie points out the danger of a single story. Do you think that Latinx literature about immigrations falls victim to this concept? And please share your ideas about why this may or may not be true. And how does your book add to or shatters this conception? Anybody can go, it's fine. No age required.
I always go first if that was the case.
Reina, how about you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think for me, writing about immigration is something that I really love to do, because immigration has been, one of the issues in the United States that is constantly separating us instead of bringing us together. And, this country was founded by immigrants. It has been built by immigrant labor and tears and hard work and dedication. So I feel that, the sooner we can embrace our identity as an immigrant nation, the faster we can actually come together as a country to make this a better country for all, and more welcoming towards immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees. So the way I see my work in terms of an immigrant writer writing about immigration is me trying to do two things at the same time, which is, one is trying to educate people who don't know a whole lot about the immigrant experience, because their immigration experience happened generations ago. So they have lost a connection with their ancestors who immigrated. And I kind of want to remind them of that experience. So hopefully when they read my books, they're able to get a glimpse into what life might have been like for their grandmother or their grandfather or great grandparents, or even their parents if they're children of immigrants. And then, of course, I also want to use my books as a celebration of the immigrant experience and to empower immigrants, especially child immigrants, in celebrating their stories and celebrating who they are. And that is what I focus on. I feel that the immigrant experience is a very universal experience, and it doesn't matter what country you come from. You know, if you're coming from Latin America, if you're coming from Europe or Africa, it's still the same pain. We all feel the same pain, regardless of what country we're coming from. The same pain, the same hardships, the same sorrows. We still have to leave our loved ones behind. We still experience family separation. We still leave our homes behind. We come here pursuing a dream that may or may not come true. But here we are, you know, working together as a community, as a society, and just doing the best that we can. So I don't know if it's one story or not, but the immigrant story, to me, it's a universal story that needs to be continued to be written about and acknowledged.
I want to say
I mean, I
something. I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. Now you go. You go
I
ahead.
got inspired. I always love hearing Reina talk about these themes. But your question is whether it is we are just repeating the immigrant story as if that's the only story that we have, to tell. But the truth is that I don't think that we have said enough about that yet. That the voices that have talked about immigration are so seldom here that those stories really aren't around. And because of that, there are a lot of misconceptions. One of them being that being everything that relates to being an immigrant, whether you don't speak the language or you don't, your culture is different to the culture that we are at right now. Either all of those things are narrated as a deficiency. And as long as we keep thinking that being an immigrant takes something away from us in our value, our intelligence, even our beauty, as long as we keep saying, and a lot of people believe that, both inside and outside of the community, we are gonna have to keep telling those stories because we haven't just said what we have to say yet. And it is an intrinsic part of us that give us not a deficiency, but our beauty, our strength, our power. So why will not be telling these stories? Why will not our stories be impregnated by the fact that we come from other places and we have all these things that we share, like Reina was saying, our hopes, our love, everything that we are because of we come from another place. So I don't think that it's a monolithic story. I don't think it's a single story. I think it's the root of many, many stories that we have to tell.
Yeah, I just like to echo that a little bit. And these stories, even as I look at your books, the people in the panel, I mean, they're so rooted in the personal experience, and personal emotion that when you tell these stories, they have a different tone, each one of them, So it's not really one voice. Reina tells it in terms of a memoir. Aida, you tell it in terms of poetry. Alejandra tells it from a different perspective, and Yui with her for illustration. So it's really a very diverse, even though it is a universal story, it is told with so many different hues that it's just so beautiful. Yes, more needs to be told, but I also hope that it's always that these stories always come from like a deep source of emotion, that somebody feels that something needs to be said and something needs to be done, and the way to do it is through the talents that you have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
I want to add to what Francisco was saying. And I mean, the thing is that we're not just immigrants. That's not the only thing that defines us. We have other interests. We have other things that have happened in our lives. So to say that our stories are just about one thing, they're not. They're about life. They're about living. They're about loving and all that. And it's our interpretations of how we're bringing these stories forth. So they could never be just one story because we are all different people. We've all had different experiences. We all have different interests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that for me, it becomes really limiting. It limits us to like I'm thinking about American Dirt, right? And how American Dirt was claimed the novel of the Americas, and how that became the dominant narrative when there is such a large body of work by so many Latinx writers, especially when we're dealing with Latinx, Latin American immigration. And how that became the narrative that people wanted to see about the narco, and like it was just one story. And so I really admire all of us for dismantling that, and I think that we constantly have to push back against that single narrative of what publishing and actually the world has kind of framed for us. So like Reina, you talked about like, and Francisco, you also talked about like the universality of our stories, right? Like, how do you make these unique experiences universal, right? Because there's a little bit of a tension there, right? Like, how does your genre or your form help you or hinder you in this regard? And especially given the age of the children or the audience that you're trying to reach.
Yeah, well, when I write, I always think about the fact that maybe I'm writing an immigrant story, but I'm writing about the human experience. So anybody who picks up my book is a human being and will be able to relate to my book at some level, you know? And yeah, like for example, I'm writing about immigration, and then maybe my readers are not immigrants themselves, but they know what it's like to be, maybe separated from your parents if there's a divorce in the family. There's no what it if they know what it's like to have divided loyalties, where you're trying to, you're forced to pick one parent over the other. Or I also write about child abuse. I know a lot of children who are abused at home who have experienced that as well. I write about alcoholism, and alcoholism is not just in the Latino community, it's across the board, right? So many, all cultures deal with some kind of substance abuse. I write about longing and loss and dreams, and wanting a better life for myself, and all of us desire those things. So I really do feel that whatever it is that we're writing about, even though it is Latino literature or if it's immigrant literature, ultimately it is we're writing about the human experience, and we will be able to connect to the humanity within our readers.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. And I mean, that's the thing. We write for humans, and we're writing about human experiences. I will say that a few of my books have been read to dogs, but I haven't actually, seen the dogs reading the words themselves. But the dogs have enjoyed it. But yes, we're writing to humans, we're writing about humans, and we're writing about things that all people have some knowledge, some experience about. And the immigration is just one aspect of the things that we're writing about.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're also we're writing about situations that are very difficult and people who are suffering, but we're trying to do it in a specific way, that taps into the artists that we want to be, and the utilization of what we think we're good at. For me is creating, for me is storytelling, and one of the most important things in my book is really to show that that these young people have a way to deal with situations that are hard, that are active. So I created this form. I wrote the story in the form of a thriller, with a lot of suspense and kind of what happens next kind of thing. and I, you know, the character, what the characters do eventually is to show kind of a form of heroism that I think can be translated to other situations, and the young people who read it, you know, whether they be in Utah or Alaska, you know, can see this kind of confrontation with evil and a way to kind of overcome it, which I think is what we're trying to do in many ways.
Hearing you all, it makes me think about how even though we have a universal reader, a human reader, we also, I realize that we have children who will see and need to see themselves reflected in the stories that we are telling. And then we have other children that will be put in the position to recognize, honor, and even admire the story of people who are unlike them. And we are writing for all of them. We are writing for those children who maybe for the first time are going to see themselves and their experiences being put in a book. And then we are also doing a work that hopefully will get to those children who have always seen themselves in the pages of books and are not accustomed to see people that are different from them with other experiences and actually applaud them, you know, for whatever their experiences, their heroism, their resourcefulness, and but we are dealing with all of those readers, and I think that the work that we are doing is giving children the chance to both see themselves in the pages of the books, but also to see others in the pages of the books and know that they are also of value. That because we are accustomed to see one kind of a protagonist in the books, we know that we either grew up with that or we are still reading those kind of books in which the protagonist is always the same and it's not us. But also, if you are a kid who has always seen yourself in the pages of the book, we are not accustomed to see other experiences, and we might have a resistance to that. But because we are writing for the youngest of our humans, hopefully we are putting there the ground in which children will develop the ability to read all kinds of stories and know that they are theirs, no matter if the character is different to he or her.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. In Land of the Cranes, I'll say that my purpose was to show children agency. So kind of like taking off on what you said. Yes, I wanted them to see themselves reflected, and I wanted them to see a window into a world that they had not known and develop empathy. But then I wanted to kind of build on that a little more. I wanted to show them that, like, if Betita, this young girl in a detention center at 9 years old, can find light in her darkest hour, then you can too. This is your roadmap. This is how you can do it. And so for me, that is like the universal truth that I wanted to communicate to children in my book. I think we have a question for just a flash answer. A time for just a flash answer. And let's see. So what I know we're talking about painful experiences and uncertain experiences, and what in writing your book offered you the most healing or inspiration?
I go first. I got the
Go.
when I was writing about the women and who disappeared in Juarez, I got to talk to a lot of the mothers, and you really and some of them have a kind of funny hope, because they kind of know that maybe their daughters will never be seen again, but it's still a hope that they have. And so that inspired me. I don't think you will ever be the same, after talking to some of those mothers.
Yeah, I think for me, writing this book was very healing because it gave me a chance to look back at my life and to really reflect on all the things that happened and to realize that, I had spent so many years regretting these things and being ashamed of my experiences. And then I realized that there was nothing here to be ashamed of, that all of these things that happened to me had led me to where I am today, have made me the person that I am today. And I really like my life. I love my life. I like who I am. So now I have turned it around. Instead of regretting or being ashamed, I feel that this book was an act of celebration, an act of celebrating my immigrant experiences, my Mexican culture, and my parents and the sacrifices that we made as a family.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah, for me, it's hope. It's, I think it was Yuyi who was saying it, that even in the darkest hour, there's always hope. And as long as you can keep that faith, however that faith presents itself, but that hope and that knowledge that it could get better, I think that for me was what was really inspiring.
Juji, last.
For me, the realization that even my own beliefs could be turned around. I always thought myself as someone who came to United States like that with a deficiency. I didn't have anything with me. And realizing that that was completely untrue, that in fact I had brought so much with me, while making the book, being able to list them, to put them, to just make images about it, it just make it so much more real that we all have all these great gifts that we are bringing with ourselves when we come to a new country.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Wow, what a wonderful, just a bounty of information and sentimiento and dulzura. I really appreciate all of your struggle and your stories. We have questions from readers that we're going to pop up. So let's go to them.
Hi, my name is Taylor. How do you decide who to dedicate your books to?
That's a good question. I can answer that quickly, briefly. I dedicated the book to my mother who passed, and she is an immigrant, was an immigrant, and she taught me the beauty of our strength. And the book was published just after she died.
Yeah, I dedicated this book to my sister because if you read the book, you will see that my sister is actually the hero in the story. And she was just a like amazing older sister who take care of me, and she protected me as much as she could. So I really felt that this book was almost like a love letter to my sister, and that's why I dedicated it to her.
I dedicate it to my grandchild, whoever is next. I really want to stop writing, but my kids keep having kids, so I don't know what to do.
Beautiful.
I usually dedicate my books to the person who inspired me through the journey of what the story I was gonna tell. And in this case, like dreamers, I dedicated it to all dreamers, all the people who hold dreams, and that really inspired me to create this book.
We tend to dedicate it to a group of people who, usually those who have experienced something similar to what my characters have. But my first book was definitely dedicated to Mommy because I couldn't have done it without her.
All right, I think we got another question.
Hello, my name is John David and I live in Bangkok. I have a question. If you could change one thing about your profession, what would it be?
Wow. I know how much Latinx writers get paid. I want us to get paid more, like American Dirt money.
Yeah, where's $1 million? Yeah, I would love to see more representation. I feel that Latino writers don't get enough opportunities to publish their work. So it's not just that we're underpaid, we're also underpublished. So I would like to see us have more opportunities in terms of publishing, but also getting more attention from the media when we do publish, and getting more attention from film. Not many of us are having Hollywood knock on our doors asking us for the film rights to our books. And overall, I feel more recognition of the work and our contribution to American literature.
I would like to change this sense of books, of people's saviors that sometimes authors have about their work, where they think that we are gonna, not us, but maybe a lot of authors feel like they are gonna rescue children from being something that they should not be, when in reality children are so perfect that we should be learning from them. So a lot of authors are still making their works thinking that the book they make is going to change children and is going to save them from something unfathomable. And I wish that we could all see this more as a road in which we all grow. And I would love to change that.
I think everybody said what I would say.
All right. Okay, I think we have another question, but this time without a video. So the question is, what made you want to make books about your life or what you love? That's from Zoe N., a fifth grader from the Bronx, New York.
Yeah, I don't think I had any choice. I think it just kind of happens. It's what comes naturally to you. And after a while, you begin to realize that what comes naturally to you and what gives you pleasure is there for a reason, and you begin to sort of see that maybe the reason is that that's what you're supposed to be doing with your life. And the truth is that if you don't do it, you feel terrible.
Yeah,
I will say that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I will say, thank you, Reina. I will say that I always write books that I want to read myself. So if I wouldn't write a book that I didn't feel passionate about, that didn't interest me, because I would never read it. And I am always thinking of, what would I do? What would I like to see? And I try to reflect that in the stuff that I write.
Yeah, what inspired me to write my own story was that when I was a young girl reading books, and I read a lot, I never found stories about immigrant children like me. And I would often feel left out of literature. And I felt that maybe my story was not that important, and that's why it wasn't in a book. So when I grew up and I became a writer, I decided that I was going to write those stories, because our immigrant stories do matter. They do deserve to be part of literature. And the immigrant story is the American story. So even though they're always trying to leave us out of American literature, we should be front and center. So this is my way of rebelling and protesting and saying, no, we do need our stories to be told, and here is my contribution. So I really hope that, if you guys have a story that needs to be told, you have to tell it. You have to take it on and do it yourself.
Gracias por eso, Reina. I definitely feel also like that. I know that when I write a story, it's because I cannot even stop it. So I will not critique myself for my choice. I will not put myself down because I have chosen to write a story about something that feels unworthy, ridiculous, or maybe it's not even a good story. What I will tell anyone, and especially children, is that you just write whatever comes out of you. and see what happens with that. Don't question it. Don't say, oh, no, this is bad, or this, nobody's going to want to hear about this. Just write it down. It is very valid because it's your story. And that's the permission I give myself when I'm writing too. So at the end, I realized, well, I just end up with a story about a boy who wrestles momias de Guanajuato, or a grandmother who is visited by a skeleton, or the story of how I came to the United States with my child. But more than anything else is that I will not question those stories. The stories are not for that, especially when you're going to write them. You can question them later, but not when you are writing them. When you are writing them, the only thing that they need to be is out. Just bring them out and see what happens with them.
Perfecto, perfecto, qué lindo. All right, I think we have one last question and just a few minutes to answer. So if you can make your answers brief. Let's see. What has inspired you to write many books about immigrants' lives? That's from Gabi Yu in 7th grade in Massachusetts.
I think that a lot of things happened to me when I came to the United States from Mexico. I was 9 years old, and I felt that I didn't know any English, and the school that I went to would like whack me in the behind whenever they caught me speaking Spanish. So there was kind of a feeling of inferiority that I think I had to overcome, and it took me many years to kind of like myself, And I think that that's kind of inspired me later when I started to write. I always write about Mexican American characters. I always write kind of in the border area, and I think that that's because I want to, in a way, give to children something that I didn't get when I was coming over.
For me, is the realization that immigration is beautiful. And I wanted to talk and write about not only, for example, not only about humans and how we migrate, but also how animals migrate, how that is part of life, that's part of survival, how animals do it so they can thrive. We humans do it for the same reason. So as I was studying and learning more about what migration is in different parts of the world and even in different species, I realized that migration is something beautiful because it helps us to live, and it helps us grow, and it helps us take care of the people that we love. When families migrate, they do it so that they can take care also of the people that comes with them. So it's an act of love. And that is inspiring to me. So of course I wanted to write a book about immigration.
Qué lindo. Can I piggyback off of that? For me, that's exactly right. My own immigrant experience is that I was born in Mexico, and I was brought over when I was 9 months old. And in my early 20s, I found out about this prophecy of Aztlan that said that the Aztecs left Aztlan and went to found their great city in Tenochtitlan, in Mexico City, and that one day that they would return back to Aztlan, and Aztlan has been translated to the land of the cranes. And to me, that concept of migration and coming back and how we populated the whole world was the foundation of why I wrote Land of the Cranes. Absolutely. So. Anybody else?
Yeah, well, I mean, I already said what inspired me to write about immigration, but I think what continues to inspire me is the fact that, as you said earlier, that as a country, we still haven't really learned how to accept and how to celebrate that immigrants that are here. Instead, we continue to criminalize immigration and punish immigrants for immigrating. And I want to keep writing stories about immigration as a way to inspire people to finally accept the immigrants that are here in this country, to welcome the immigrants that are coming to this country. And instead of detaining and separating immigrant families, we should definitely be more welcoming and more inclusive and working together, to make sure that everybody in this country, whether immigrant or not, that we all thrive, not just survive, but that we thrive together.
Yeah, everyone has said such wonderful things. I'll just say that, I write it because it's a part of me, and it's something that I feel should be known more broadly, and not just in the US, but in the whole wide world.
Mhm. Wow. Well, thank you all so much. I wish we had so much more time to talk because I just adore all of your perspectives and admire you all so much for the beautiful work and the important work that you are doing to expand our voices and really affect children. So thank you so much. And thank you all for coming and being with us today at the first ever Latinx Kidlit Book Festival, and check out our bookstore, check out our Flipgrids, and buy our books. Everybody, wave, show your book. See you.